Captain Sarah Chen stood at the helm of the ISV Hawking, her eyes fixed on the massive derelict vessel that loomed before them. The unknown ship hung motionless against the backdrop of unfamiliar stars, its hull gleaming with an otherworldly iridescence that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the void itself. "Analysis confirms no life signs," reported Dr. Marcus Wong, the ship's xenobiologist. His dark eyes were glued to his holographic display, fingers dancing through streams of data. "But these readings, they're unlike anything in our database." Sarah nodded, her jaw set with determination. After 15 years of deep space exploration, she thought she'd seen everything the universe could throw at her. But this vessel, it defied explanation. Its architecture followed no known design principles, its surface covered in what appeared to be crystalline growths that refracted light in impossible ways. "Engineering, what's your assessment?" she called out, her voice steady despite the tension coiling in her stomach. Chief Engineer Raj Patel's voice crackled over the comm. "The structure is stable, but those crystals, they're not just growing on the hull, Captain. They're integrated with it. It's as if they're part of the ship's original design." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. They'd been tracking this derelict for 3 days after detecting its slow drift toward the Epsilon colony. If they couldn't stop it or alter its course, it would pass through one of humanity's busiest trade routes in less than a week. "Dr. Wong, those crystals, any sign they're biological?" Sarah asked, already knowing she wouldn't like the answer. "Yes and no," Marcus replied, frustration evident in his voice. "They exhibit characteristics of both organic and artificial structures. They're growing, Captain, but with a precision that suggests technological origin. And they're consuming the ship's material to do it." Sarah's first officer, Commander David O'Neill, stepped forward. "If those things reach Epsilon colony—" "Exactly," Sarah cut him off. She wouldn't let herself complete that thought. "Prep the boarding team. Full containment protocols. I want us ready to move in 30 minutes. The next half hour was a blur of activity. Sarah stood in the airlock chamber, checking the seals on her containment suit for the 3rd time. Around her, the boarding team did the same, Marcus with his sampling kit, Raj clutching his engineering tools, and Security Chief Maya Santos, her pulse rifle held with practiced ease. "Remember," Sarah addressed her team, "this is reconnaissance only. We find out what these crystals are, how to stop them, and get out. No heroics." The team acknowledged with grim nods. They'd all seen the simulation results. If these crystalline growths reached a populated area, the potential for catastrophic contamination was nearly infinite. The airlock cycled, and they pushed off toward the derelict. Up close, the crystalline structures were even more mesmerizing. They branched across the hull like frozen lightning, each facet catching and amplifying the distant starlight. Maya found them an entry point, an emergency airlock that Raj managed to override with surprisingly little effort. As they entered the ship, their helmet lights illuminated corridors that seemed to be carved from living crystal. "The air's breathable," Marcus announced, checking his instruments. "But I strongly advise against removing our suits. These crystals, they're reacting to our presence." Sarah saw it too. Where their lights touched the crystalline surfaces, subtle pulses of energy rippled outward, like ripples in a pond. The effect was beautiful, but deeply unsettling. They made their way deeper into the ship, following what appeared to be main corridors. The interior architecture was alien, but there was a logic to it they could follow. Every surface was either covered in or transformed into the crystal-like material. "Captain," Raj called out, his voice hushed with awe. "I think I've found the bridge, or whatever passes for it." They entered a vast chamber dominated by a crystalline formation that rose from floor to ceiling like a frozen fountain. At its base, partially consumed by the growth, sat what was unmistakably a control console. "This is impossible," Marcus breathed, scanning the structure. "The crystals, they're not just growing randomly. They're forming circuits, data pathways. This isn't a contamination, it's a transformation." Before Sarah could respond, the crystal fountain pulsed with brilliant light. Patterns of energy began racing through the crystalline networks surrounding them, and a deep harmonic resonance filled the chamber. "We need to leave," Maya said, raising her rifle. "Now." But Sarah stood transfixed as the light coalesced into what appeared to be a holographic display. Symbols and diagrams she couldn't comprehend floated in the air before them, and beneath it all, a single phrase in perfectly rendered English. "Don't touch anything." Maya's warning came too late. Raj had already reached toward the holographic display, his engineer's curiosity overwhelming his caution. The crystalline structure pulsed once, brilliantly, and a wave of energy rippled through the chamber. The team watched in horror as tiny crystals began forming on Raj's suit where his hand had passed through the hologram. They spread rapidly, creating intricate patterns across the material. "Get that suit off him," Sarah ordered, but Marcus interrupted. "Wait. Look at the pattern, it's not random. Those are circuit pathways, just like the ship's crystals. They're communicating." Raj stood perfectly still, his breathing heavy but controlled. "He's right, Captain. I can feel it. It's like having another sense. The crystals, they're not parasites, they're an interface." Sarah's mind raced. Every protocol said they should quarantine Raj immediately, but her instincts told her they were on the verge of something unprecedented. "Talk to me, Raj. What are you getting?" "It's massive," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. "This ship, it's not just a vessel, it's a seed. These crystals, they're like a living computer network. They're trying to upgrade us." The words had barely left his mouth when alarms blared from their own ship. Commander O'Neill's voice crackled through their comms, tight with urgency. "Captain, we've got a situation. The crystalline material, it's spreading to the Hawking." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "How?" "It's using our docking tether as a conduit. We can't sever the connection without stranding you here, but in approximately 40 minutes, the growth will reach our primary systems." Maya raised her rifle. "Permission to destroy the crystal formation, Captain." "Negative," Raj said quickly. "These crystals are quantum entangled. Destroying this node could trigger a catastrophic reaction." He paused, his hands moving through the holographic display as if he'd been doing it all his life. "There's something else. The ship is receiving signals, dozens of them, from all across the galaxy. We're not the first to find one of these." Sarah watched as new holographic displays bloomed around them, showing what appeared to be star maps. Dots of light pulsed across them, each one presumably representing another crystalline ship. "The initialization sequence," Marcus said suddenly. "It's not just this ship, it's all of them. They're all waiting for authorization." "But for what?" Before anyone could respond, the crystals on Raja's suit pulsed again, and new text appeared in the hologram, neural interface established. "Accessing human historical database." Images began flashing through the holographic field: Earth's history, human technological development, their wars, their triumphs, their failures. The crystals were learning about them, analyzing them. "Captain," Raj said, his voice different now, filled with a strange certainty. "I know what these ships are. They're part of a network, a defensive grid created by something ancient. Something that saw what was coming and tried to prepare." "Prepare for what?" Sarah demanded. The answer came not from Raj but from the ship itself, as new images filled the chamber. They showed galaxy-spanning civilizations rising and falling, consumed by something that looked like living darkness. The final image was of a massive form, blacker than the void itself, moving between the stars. "Oh God," Marcus breathed. They weren't preparing to fight an enemy. They were preparing to fight extinction itself. The chamber shuddered, and more alarms blared from the Hawking. "Captain," O'Neill's voice was desperate now. "The crystals are approaching our engine core. 10 minutes until critical systems are compromised. Sarah looked at her team, at the impossible situation they found themselves in. The crystals weren't a threat, they were an offer, a chance to access technology beyond their comprehension. But that access came with a price they didn't yet understand. "Raj," she said finally. "Can you communicate with it? Can you tell it to stop spreading to our ship?" He nodded slowly, his hands moving through the holographic controls. "Yes, but... Captain, it's asking for a choice. We can either accept full integration, let the crystals transform our ship and crew like they did this one, or what? Or we can take the data core. A smaller version of the crystal network, containing everything, the technology, the warnings, the defense plans. But we'd have to leave now, before the transformation of this ship completes. Once that happens, it's programmed to jump to predetermined coordinates." New alarms sounded, and the chamber's crystals began pulsing faster, more urgently. "Time's up, Captain," Maya warned. "We need to decide now." Sarah looked at the holographic displays, at the darkness between the stars, at her crew. Humanity had always faced impossible choices, that's what had driven them to the stars in the first place. Now they faced another one, perhaps their most important yet. "Show me the data core," she ordered. The crystal formation shifted, revealing a small, geometrically perfect crystalline sphere about the size of a fist. It pulsed with the same inner light as the larger growths, but its patterns were more concentrated, more refined. "Raj, download everything you can about these crystals and their purpose. Marcus, help him understand what we're dealing with. Maya." She turned to her security chief. "If this goes wrong, you know what to do." As her crew worked, Sarah stared at the holographic images of the darkness between the stars. Humanity had thought themselves alone in their fight for survival. Now they knew better, but knowledge wasn't the same as wisdom. Whatever choice they made here would reshape not just their future, but potentially the future of all life in the galaxy. The chamber's crystals pulsed one final time, and new text appeared: "Choose wisely. The darkness grows hungry." The ISV Hawking burst from its emergency jump with a flash of quantum distortion, its hull gleaming with traces of crystalline residue that refused to be scraped away. In the medical bay, Sarah stood watching through a containment field as Marcus examined Raj. The engineer lay on a diagnostic bed, his skin traced with faint, luminescent patterns that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. "Talk to me, doctor," Sarah said, trying to keep the worry from her voice. "What's his condition?" Marcus adjusted his scanners, frowning at the readings. "The crystal interface has integrated with his nervous system, but it's not invasive. It's more like a symbiosis. His neural activity is off the charts, but stable." Raj stirred, his eyes opening. They too held a faint crystalline sheen. "Captain," he said, his voice stronger than it had been since their escape. "The coordinates, we need to reach them before anyone else does." Sarah glanced at the crystalline sphere, now secured in a quantum containment field in the corner of the medical bay. It pulsed steadily, like a heartbeat. "The data core's been transmitting since we brought it aboard. Half the galaxy probably knows our location by now." As if on cue, Commander O'Neill's voice came through the intercom. "Captain, to the bridge. Multiple ships just dropped out of quantum space. They're on an intercept course." Sarah rushed to the bridge, her mind racing. The sight that greeted her through the main viewport made her breath catch. 3 vessels approached, a Centaurian dreadnought, its hull bristling with weapons, a void-borne mining ship, modified for combat, and a sleek black zone vessel that could only belong to the shadowy consortium. "They're hailing us," O'Neill reported. "All of them." "Put them through," Sarah ordered, straightening her uniform. Split screen. 3 faces appeared on the main display: Admiral Kosvar of the Centaurian fleet, his scaled skin reflecting the light of his bridge, Director Chen of the Void-Born Collective, her cybernetic eyes whirring as they focused, and a figure shrouded in darkness that spoke for the consortium. Captain Chen, the Centaurian admiral began, his translator struggling with his guttural tones. You have something that does not belong to you. The crystal technology is the property of all spacefaring races, Director Chen cut in, her artificial voice harsh. The Voidborn will not allow any single faction to claim it. The consortium figure remained silent, but Sarah felt its attention like a physical weight. You don't understand what you're dealing with, Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady. This isn't about claiming technology. There's something out there, something that we know about the darkness, Director Chen interrupted. Our deep space probes have detected its approach. That's why we need the defense grid now. Sarah felt a chill. How long? At current velocity, it will reach the outer colonies in less than a standard year, Admiral Kosvar answered. We've been tracking it since it consumed the Hyades cluster. The medical bay doors slid open, and Raj walked onto the bridge, supported by Marcus. Maya trained her weapon on him instinctively before lowering it at Sarah's gesture. You're all wrong, Raj said, his crystalline eyes reflecting the starlight. The defense grid isn't a weapon. It's a key. The holographic displays flickered, and new data streamed across them, information downloaded from the crystal core. It showed massive structures hidden in the void between galaxies, ancient machines that dwarfed solar systems. The precursors, Raj continued, his voice taking on an otherworldly timbre, they didn't just build a defense network. They built an evacuation route. The crystals aren't meant to fight the darkness, they're meant to help us escape it. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The consortium figure leaned forward, speaking for the first time in a voice that seemed to echo from countless throats. Escape to where? Another galaxy, Raj answered. One they prepared for us. But the evacuation protocols require consensus. All spacefaring races must agree to activate the network together, or it remains dormant. Sarah watched as the other commanders processed this information. The fate of their civilizations hung in the balance: fight a hopeless battle against an incomprehensible enemy, or abandon their homes for an uncertain future among the stars. The coordinates, Sarah said, understanding finally dawning. They lead to the control center for the entire network. Raj nodded. A place the precursors called the Nexus. But we're not the only ones who know about it now. The darkness, it's aware. It's coming for it. New alarms blared across all 4 ships. Long-range sensors detected massive quantum disturbances, dozens of vessels dropping out of jump space around them. Some bore the markings of known civilizations, others were completely alien. More are coming, O'Neill reported, his hands flying over the tactical display. Everyone who received the signal. They're all converging here. Sarah looked at the faces on her view screen, former enemies now forced to contemplate an unthinkable alliance. We need to make a decision, she said. Not just for humanity, but for all sentient life in the galaxy. The crystalline patterns on Raj's skin pulsed more intensely. Captain, he said urgently. The core is receiving a new transmission. Something's approaching, something massive. The void between the stars seemed to ripple, and Sarah felt her heart stop as a shadow began to take form. The darkness had found them, and now they were out of time. The choice they made here would determine not just their fate, but the fate of every living being in the galaxy. Fight or flee. Stand or run. Die with their worlds or live among strange stars. The darkness emerged like a tear in reality itself, a vastness that denied description. Where it passed, stars dimmed and space itself seemed to warp. On the bridge of the ISV Hawking, Sarah watched as her sensor displays went haywire, unable to process what they were detecting. Multiple ships are powering up weapons, O'Neill reported, his voice tight. The Centaurians are taking up defensive positions. They can't fight it, Raj said, his crystalline eyes fixed on the approaching void. None of us can. The precursors tried, they had technology thousands of years beyond ours. They failed. The communications array lit up as dozens of ships began broadcasting simultaneously. Fear knew no species barrier, Sarah could hear it in every alien language that filled her bridge. The coordinates to the Nexus, Sarah said suddenly. How far? Marcus checked the navigation console. 3 quantum jumps away. But in separate directions, the precursors designed it so no single faction could reach it alone. The crystalline sphere in the medical bay pulsed urgently, and new data flooded their screens. Raj translated, his voice taking on that strange harmonic quality. The Nexus requires representatives from at least 5 spacefaring civilizations to activate. A failsafe, to ensure cooperation. Sarah opened a channel to all ships. Listen to me. We don't have time for politics or posturing. That thing out there, it's already consumed countless galaxies. We can fight it and die, or we can work together and survive. And trust humans to lead us? Director Chen's artificial voice was skeptical. Your species is barely space-capable. No one leads, Sarah countered. We go together, or we die alone. Those are our only options now. The darkness continued its approach, and Sarah watched as ships began to break formation. Some fled into quantum space, while others moved to attack positions, their weapons charging uselessly against the incomprehensible enemy. The consortium vessel suddenly moved alongside the Hawking, its shrouded commander speaking in that multi-tone voice. We have accessed the precursor data. The human speaks truth. We support the evacuation protocol. One by one, other ships began to signal their agreement. The Centaurian dreadnought, the Void-borne mining vessel, a Meridian Arc ship that had just arrived, and finally, a massive living vessel of the silicon-based Lithosians. 5 species, Marcus breathed. We have our consensus. The crystalline patterns across Raja's skin flared brilliantly. Uploading jump coordinates now. Each ship needs to follow their designated path exactly. When we arrive, we'll have minutes at most before the darkness reaches the Nexus. Sarah felt the weight of history on her shoulders as she gave the order. All ships, prepare for synchronized quantum jump on my mark. The void rippled again as the darkness accelerated, as if sensing their intentions. Several of the ships that had chosen to fight disappeared into its endless black, not even debris marking their passing. Jump coordinates locked, O'Neill reported. All participating vessels signal ready. Sarah took one last look at the galaxy she had called home, at the stars that had guided humanity's first steps into the cosmos. Mark. Space twisted as 5 ships vanished into quantum space, each following their part of the ancient coordinates. The jump felt different this time, longer, deeper, as if they were traveling paths that hadn't been used in millennia. When they emerged, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Before them floated a structure that defied comprehension, a massive lattice of crystalline architecture that spanned the space between 3 dying stars. The Nexus. By all that lives, Admiral Kosvar whispered over the calm, the legends were true. But they had no time to admire the view. Their sensors were already detecting the approach of the darkness, its vast form distorting space as it pursued them. All ships, dock at your designated points, Sarah ordered. We need to initiate the activation sequence before that thing reaches us. The 5 vessels moved into position around the Nexus, connecting to massive crystalline docking arrays that pulsed with welcome. As soon as they were secured, the structure began to change, its geometric patterns shifting and realigning. The Nexus is interfacing with our crystal core, Raj reported, his eyes now blazing with inner light. It's showing me something. A memory. Holographic images filled the bridge, showing the final moments of the precursor civilization. Sarah watched as they faced the same choice, stay and fight a hopeless battle, or ensure life would continue among distant stars. They died to give us this chance, Raj said softly. To ensure some part of existence would survive. The darkness was visible now, its endless void beginning to eclipse the dying stars around them. The Nexus trembled as ancient machines awakened, preparing to tear a hole in space itself, a passage to another galaxy, prepared and seeded with life by the precursors eons ago. But the evacuation sequence wasn't complete. One final choice remained, and it would change the course of all their civilizations forever. The Nexus hummed with power, its crystalline structure resonating with energies that hadn't been awakened in millions of years. Inside the ISV Hawking, Sarah watched as the final activation sequence began, the ancient machinery preparing to tear open a pathway between galaxies. "All ships report ready," O'Neill announced, his hands steady on the controls despite the tension in his voice. "The Nexus is at 70% power." Through the viewport, the darkness continued its inexorable approach. Where it touched the dying stars surrounding them, their light simply ceased to be, absorbed into that unfathomable void. Sarah felt its hunger, its ancient and implacable purpose. "Captain," Raj called out, his crystalline threaded skin pulsing with urgent patterns. "There's something else in the precursor data. Something they didn't tell us." The holographic displays shifted, revealing new information that made Sarah's blood run cold. "The passage," she said, understanding dawning. "It's not big enough for all of us, is it?" "No," Raj confirmed grimly. "The power required to maintain a stable intergalactic corridor, even the precursors couldn't generate enough energy to move everyone at once. We can save perhaps 60% of our combined populations." The communications array erupted as the other species' representatives received the same information. Accusations and demands flew back and forth in a dozen languages. "This was your plan all along." Director Chen's artificial voice crackled with rage. "To trap us here and save only yourselves." Silence. The consortium leader's multi-toned voice cut through the chaos. "The darkness approaches. We must decide now who lives and who dies." Sarah watched as the other ships began powering up their weapons, ancient alliances and hatreds threatening to doom them all. The darkness drew closer, now less than 10 minutes from reaching them. "Wait," she broadcast. "There might be another way." She turned to Raj. "The precursor's final memory, show them." Raj nodded, and the holographic display changed again. It showed the last moments of the precursor civilization, but this time Sarah saw something she'd missed before. The crystals weren't just a technology, they were a transformation. The precursors didn't just build the Nexus, Sarah explained, her voice carrying to all ships. They became part of it. They transferred their consciousness into the crystal network itself. "Preposterous," Admiral Kosvar growled. "You expect us to abandon our physical forms?" "I expect us to evolve," Sarah countered. "The crystal integration that happened to Raj, it wasn't an accident. It was a test, showing us what's possible." The darkness was minutes away now, its vast form beginning to eclipse the Nexus itself. The structure trembled as ancient engines pushed themselves to their limits. "The crystal network," Raj said suddenly, his eyes wide with revelation. "It can hold us all. Not just our bodies, but everything we are, our memories, our cultures, our very essence. We can survive together, but we have to change." Sarah opened a channel to her crew. "This has to be voluntary. I won't order anyone to transform themselves. But whatever you choose, choose quickly." To her amazement, it was Maya who stepped forward first. "I've followed you into hell before, Captain," the security chief said with a slight smile. "What's one more impossible mission?" One by one, crew members from all 5 ships began to signal their agreement. The crystal network pulsed with growing power as it prepared to receive them. "Nexus at maximum power," O'Neill reported. "Transformation protocols ready. The darkness will reach us in 3 minutes." Sarah took one last look at her crew, at humanity's representatives in this moment of ultimate change. Then she turned to the viewport, where the void waited to consume them all. "Begin the transformation," she ordered. The crystal network blazed with light, streams of energy connecting all 5 ships to the Nexus. Sarah felt it begin, a sensation like falling into light itself. The crystalline pattern spread across her skin, not just changing her body, but transforming the very essence of what she was. Around them, the darkness howled in ancient fury as its prey began to slip away. But it was too late. Within the crystal network, Sarah felt the presence of others, not just her crew, but thousands of minds from all 5 species, their consciousness merging with the ancient machinery even as they maintained their individual identities. The Nexus flared one final time, and the transformed consciousness of 5 civilizations shot through the intergalactic corridor, leaving their physical forms and their galaxy behind. The darkness could consume their abandoned ships, their stations, even their worlds, but it could not devour what they had become. In the space between galaxies, the crystal network carried them toward their new home. Sarah felt Raja's presence in the stream of shared consciousness, along with Marcus, Maya, and countless others. They were no longer merely human, Centaurian, Voidborn, Consortium, or Lithosian. They had become something new, something that could survive even the death of galaxies. And as they traveled between the stars, their combined consciousness began to plan. The darkness had consumed countless galaxies, but now they had the knowledge of the precursors and the combined wisdom of 5 civilizations. They would reach their new home, and they would prepare for the day when they would return to face the darkness not as separate species fighting for survival, but as a single entity, evolved beyond what any of them could have imagined. The crystal network pulsed with their shared purpose as they streaked toward distant stars, carrying within it not just the legacy of 5 species, but the future of consciousness itself. The end was just another beginning. And in the infinite expanse of space, their journey was just starting.